Good morning. I'm Michael Palmer, a member of the BEC since 1958, and I was introduced to caving by Mike Baker, actually, of all people, back in about, I don't know, 1956, and obviously spent a fair bit of time in the various caves on Mendip over a long period of time, and probably the important thing is that gained a fair bit of experience going down places like Eastwater, Swildon'S, and then latterly Cuthbert's. Back then I used to live in the Wells Cathedral Coffee Bar, actually, of all places, and of course if there were any call-outs, invariably myself, Mike Whedon, Albert Francis, people like that used to get called out. In this particular case, I'm not quite sure whether we were already on some sort of standby because the cave divers were expecting to be down in the cave for a long time. Unfortunately, it was the weather at the end of the day that foreshortened the whole expedition. So what I can't remember precisely is whether we were actually already on standby or whether we were then called out. Mm-hmm. If I was called out, then probably I got up onto Mendip with Mike Whedon. Probably Brian Prewer came and gave us a lift up in his van. I know he didn't go down the cave at the time. But when we were called out, we got to Swildon'S. That's before the blockhouse was in place. And looking at the entrance, it was a big whirlpool. It was just going down at a phenomenal rate. The purpose, as I understand it, was to dive 6, to get into, dive through 5, from 4 through 5 into 6, and do various work then to see if they could penetrate further. Mm-hmm. And of course, all the people on that trip were very experienced divers at that time. Mm. And of course, the other thing, which is quite important, is that the support party was already put together. In other words, people within the sort of cave dive group circle, had already been asked to give support, yeah. And they formed little groups, 4 or 5 people per group, I think, something like that anyway. And so they were already assembled on Mendip, up by Main's Barn, ready to go down at various intervals. As I understand it, and I got this information laterally to the actual rescue, Wallington just appeared on the green and asked what was going on, and I'm not sure what explanation he had, but he was told that we're basically going down Swildon'S. Yeah. So I understand he tagged on, or asked if he could tag on to one of the parties, and that's how, unfortunately, he got down the cave. So then, going back to the actual initiation of the rescue, we were called out probably late afternoon because the weather deteriorated. It has been well documented that there was snow and ice on the surface all over Mendip, and then it started to rain as well, which made the situation far worse. But the actual scene at the Swildon'S entrance was phenomenal. I mean, it was just a great whirlpool of water, and anyway, by then there'd been very little communication. People had been coming out of the cave, but I don't think the communication was brilliant because of the conditions. We were then asked or tasked with taking some tackle down to help with the lifelining at the 40. But at that point in time, we knew nothing about Wallington, nothing at all. So Mike Whedon and I sumped through the entrance and made our way down to the 40. Now, I don't know, people probably don't know these days, but the keyhole, which is just before you get to the 40, in those days, the floor level was much higher, so actually the bottom part of the keyhole was a sump. And of course now it looks entirely different to what it did then. And in fact the water through the keyhole apart from sumping in the bottom part, was actually flowing through the top part. So I can't remember exactly whether we stumped through or whether we went through the keyhole. But at that time, both Mike and I had goon suits. We'd already bought goon suits some time before, so that we could do things in Swildon'S and places like that, and not worry too much about the wet and cold, because the 40 famously has always been very wet. Probably not so much these days, because we don't have a drain pipe any longer, do we? So, however we got through, whether we sumped or whether we pushed our way through the top of the keyhole, I just can't remember precisely. But having got to the other side, I mean, the noise of the water going over the 40 was phenomenal. And I suppose, we just tried to think about, the poor guys who were still coming out of the cave. Somebody then just popped up, as it happens, up the ladder at that point in time. I can't remember whether somebody was actually lifelining at that point in time or not. But somebody popped up, somebody we knew actually, can't remember who it was exactly, but somebody we knew who said to us at that point, I don't know if you know, he said, but there's a guy down the bottom, we've been trying to get him up the ladder, but he's in a desperate condition. Later on, I also discovered, chatting to some people who, as I said, told me that he joined a party at the surface. They believe that during the parties going down the cave, bearing in mind most of these were very experienced cavers, they would move very quickly. They had a mission. They had to get tackled down the cave, and as fast as they could for the for this diving push. And they suspect that Wallington got left behind. And I think, from what I can remember, he was left behind somewhere, contrary to other information, somewhere between the 40, somewhere between the 20 and Chapman's Temple.
Right.
Now, if that's true or not, I don't know, but that's one of the stories that I was given at that time. Bearing in mind too, he was not very well equipped, caving-wise. So anyway, here we are at the top of the 40, water's absolutely pouring from everywhere, terrible noise. So we set about then, because we were told about this guy down the bottom, Wallington, being in bad condition, and we needed to get him out of the cave as fast as possible. So I can't remember precisely, but we may have taken down this special hauling gear with a bosun's chair, but I don't remember him actually coming up in a bosun's chair, to be honest with you. So I suspect we didn't actually use that because of trying to rig it for a start was pretty perilous over the top of the 40. Several attempts have been made to get Wallington up, and one of the guys coming up told us that at one stage he'd been hanging on the ladder upside down with water just pouring on him. So we gathered that he wasn't going to be in good shape at all. Finally, somebody comes up, tells us what's happening. I think Chris Hawkes was around at that time, and so was Frank Darbin. I can't remember precisely who it was. So we were given the instruction to try and haul him up, which is what we set about doing. He was hauled up, attached to the ladder because he got his foot stuck in one of the rungs somewhere. So up come the ladder, up came Wallington, and we get him up onto the ledge of the 40. Now I can't remember, other people of course, once we sorted him out, because we obviously had to get the ladder back down because there were still people down the bottom of the pitch. Okay. So Mike Whedon and I then dragged not carried, dragged is not the right word, that's not fair. We carried him up into the water rift, the streamway, up towards the keyhole, in fact. We had to stop there anyway, because at that stage nobody knew what to do with him and how we could manage him from there. So he was given chocolate. Mike and I tried to give him some resuscitation, in the sense that we caught his arms. Incidentally, his arms, when he got to the top of the 40, were bent up like this from holding onto the ladder, and they were almost rigid. We couldn't get him to move them down at all, to open them up at all. Not for a while. We did eventually, but because we got him to put them by his side. Having given him chocolate, okay, I think that was a pretty desperate move, really, under the circumstances. Bearing in mind, Mike and I were both in goon suits, and we talked about the possibility of one of us taking our goon suit off and putting on him to give him a better chance. But the thing is, under our goon suits, we didn't really have much in the way of good caving gear. So we decided that by the time we got it off, we really wouldn't be able to achieve our goal at all. So, meanwhile, of course, people are coming up and moving past us and going out the cave. So we decided what we'd try and do is see if we could get him to sump through the bottom keyhole, first of all. Right. As soon as we put him down, because bearing in mind we got him out of the water at this stage, as soon as we got him down into the water again, he screamed. I mean, he just screamed and he screamed, and we had to take him out of the water to stop him screaming. So what we did then is we straddled the rift between us, and we went up quite a few feet out of the water, more level with the top of the keyhole, and we just had him between our legs. And we rubbed his body. I should actually add here that he was only dressed in he had a flimsy cotton shirt. He had a pair of jeans type trousers. He had no shoes on at all. He had one sock. No, I don't know what happened to his helmet, because I understand he probably had carbide as well, which wouldn't have been very good under the circumstances. So all we could do was we pulled his clothes together. We rubbed his body. We rubbed his arms. We tried to get some sort of circulation going, but we weren't very successful with that at all. By then, what was quite surreal actually was it was like the whole place went quiet. I can't explain it any more than that, but it was just like there was a silence. Clearly there wasn't, because the stream was still flowing over the 40. But people had ceased going out, but obviously people were coming in probably to help with the haul out. But it went quiet, and sadly at that point, supported across our legs, he suddenly, Wallington just gave a sort of exhale of air. It was like somebody breathing out very slowly, and that was it. He had died. Obviously we looked at each other for a while and not quite knowing what to do. But by then, other people had appeared, through the keyhole, and basically the idea with them was to just wrap him up in a carry sheet and just take him out, which is what happened. Mike and I then simply followed out, helping where we could, and I think we were last out of the cave.
Like cave rescue teams?
Oh yeah, I mean the one thing that really came out of that rescue, more than anything, was our inability to resuscitate or give any sort of life-saving hope under the hypothermia situation. And I think as a result of that, the MRO then looked at these warm air breathers that would,
The little
which
dragon.
in fact, what
Little dragon.
little dragons, okay. I'm sure there was an earlier model back then, but I know that as a result of that particular rescue and that particular death, that was definitely something that was decided as being innovative, and we should have it as part of the rescue equipment.
Yeah, and I believe Dr. Oliver Lloyd, who later became the secretary of Mendip Cave Rescue, or Mendip Rescue Organisation as it was then, and the Sunset Section secretary of the Cave Diving Group, and he was also the editor of the library. He specialised in post-mortems and things, and I know he did quite a lot of work.
Yes, I think it probably
that.
stimulated that sort of, that sort of interest,
Yeah.
because suddenly here we were. Okay, in fairness, it was no fault of anybody who took part in the cave dive group push on sump. It was just an unfortunate set of circumstances where somebody just decided to tag on to a trip, which in itself was also something I think that highlighted possible improvements that could be made. For example, club members now write their trips up on boards before they go caving. The same as if you go walking, you should tell somebody where you're going and how what you propose to do, and so on.
Yeah, and things change. Okay, thank you, Mike.